Hey guys, welcome to my Otherlands Ratle video guide. What's new in this update? We're gonna get a new unit in Dreams, a new another dungeon from the Otherlands Ratle region, and new weapons and armors to craft. In this video, I'm mostly going to be talking about the weapons, as the armors are, in my opinion, not worthy to craft, since you guys are going to be getting a much better set that's also easier to unlock later on in a near future update. So let's go over the new unit, Shanie. So she comes in rarities of 4 to 5 stars. She uses the sword, is a water type user, and her attribute type is light. Valor Chant is 30% increase in strength and intellect for your party for 1 turn. You can obtain her Arc Knight tome in the Riftbreaker Very Hard dungeon. She's also really good at having a water stacking debuff or buff for your team to increase water damage. Now let's go over the first area, Zol Plains. As you can tell on the right side, you can check the map out, starting from the top where it says start, and you can work your way towards the bottom. There's chest locations and boss locations there as well. And in green, that usually signifies a secret path. Let's go over some of the enemy types that you're going to be encountering. Raptors will be weak to earth and they resist water. The flowers, dancing flowers, are weak to fire and slash and resist wind. The hornets are weak to fire pierce and they resist the wind. The shiny hounds that you may encounter are weak to water and resist fire. And the horror here is weak to water and resist fire. Let's go over the first boss here, the Hornet Boss. You're going to encounter 3 of them, which are all weak to fire and pierce and resist wind. Their attack pool consists of only physical, poison application, and a mixture between AoEs, but it's primarily single target attacks that they do. The left, middle, and right Hornets all have their own attack patterns, and my suggestion would be to try to focus killing the middle Hornet, as every second and fourth turn it will knock out 90% of one of your allies' current HP, leaving them susceptible to getting one shot if you are unlucky enough where one of the other Hornets decides to attack the weakened ally. The left Hornet is second priority due to it having multiple single target ×3 attacks on turns 3 and 4, so that could be pretty deadly too. Here on this next slide, I just show you their full rotation just so that you guys can get a better understanding. Also, look out that the right Hornet has single target physicals that will also reduce your physical resistance, making you more susceptible. Next up, we have the big dancing flower boss, who's weak to fire and slash and resists wind. This guy has a non-angry and angry phase. Basically, if you kill the 2 little ads, he gets angry, and the fight becomes harder. In the non-angry rotation, he gives a physical resistance debuff to your party, does a single target attack, then follows up with an AoE plus stun, and then a single attack, and then an AoE plus sleep. If you kill the 2 ads afterwards, he will start doing AoEs, and then another AoE plus stun, AoE plus sleep, physical resistance debuff on the party, and an AoE plus stun. My suggestion would be to mainly focus on the big boss, since you don't want him to go into angry phase too early, because the fight just gets significantly harder. Next area, area 2, we have the Vasu Mountain. And for the most part, we have the same type of ads. The only difference is we now have a TRex that is weak to water and resists fire. And there's the map again to show you guys if you guys want a reference point. First boss we're going to go over are the Flock of Raptors boss. They're weak to earth and they resist water. All their attacks are physical, so having a strength power debuff and physical resistance up buff will help. They rotate their attacks around, and they have 6 total, ranging between single target plus pain, AoEs, single target plus 50% damage to the HP of your unit, strength buffs, and another AoE. If you kill a raptor, they will cry for 1 turn, and essentially you want to start killing the others as soon as possible because they're going to start using a single target minus 50% of your current HP into a self-power buff that'll stack up to 99 times, which can get harder and harder. So my suggestion would be to go for the middle and right raptor, since they both have access to percentage damage dealt attacks, so debuffs won't really help too much there. And consider focusing down the first and then alternate between the other two by using your another force. Next we have the TRex Boss, which has no weakness and is resist to fire. The boss summons one of 3 adds to consume, and you can exploit this depending on which add they summon. If they summon a Hornet, the Hornet's weak to pierce and fire. If they summon a Raptor, it's weak to earth. For Flower, it's weak to fire and slash. And you can use your another force during this time and exploit the weakness of the adds to increase your AF time. Though the only add that I would suggest to avoid killing is the Hornet, because the Hornet actually gives a debuff to the boss that makes it easier to kill. Now, if the boss eats the flower, he'll regain a pretty decent chunk of HP. But I would say you want to definitely kill the raptor, because if the boss eats the raptor, that buff will increase its attack by more than 1,000, going up from like 1.7, 1.8k per attack to like 3k attacks, which will more likely one-shot some of your squishier 5-star units. So definitely kill the raptor and let the boss eat the Hornet to gain an advantage buff. Next, we have Lord Ukule, or the Ukule Boss. And so this boss starting phase doesn't have any weaknesses, but is resistant to fire. And they'll have many different items that they're going to be drinking. Essentially, they're going to get to a point where they're drunk. And so essentially the cadence of this fight is you want to buff your own teammates up with the proper type resist and intellect to debuff the enemy, since the enemy primarily does magic damage. And once it gets drunk, it gains a weakness to wind. That is when you want to blow all your marbles by killing it using a primarily wind team. Now I have here some of the attack patterns, such as the starting point, they buff themselves with intellect, fire single target, fire AoE, and then if they buff themselves with a strength debuff or strength buff, then you're going to expect 2 AoEs to follow afterwards. But essentially that's the idea of the fight, is buff yourself up until it gets drunk and then slam it with as much wind damage as possible. If you have a zombie unlocked, she's perfect for this fight. So next we have Nadera Volcano, and everything in this area is weak to water. Make sure you just don't bring any fire units. The TRex Boss is weak to water, resists to earth and fire. He only does physical attacks, so bring strength debuffs and physical resistance buffs. At 75% health, he'll change his attack pattern and begin to have a cumulative strength buff. And then at 25% and lower, he'll only start using AoE attacks. So you want to try to kill him as fast as possible once you hit the 75% mark and onward to prevent him from gaining too many strength buffs. It's a pretty straightforward fight. Next we have the Tiny Dragon Boss, who's weak to water and is resistant to fire and pierce. Essentially, this is the magic version of the T-Rex fight. This boss does gain more and more stacking buffs as the fight goes on, so you want to try to make sure that you kill it as soon as possible. You can use Mighty's Aqua Wall or Mario's Aurora Force to reduce the incoming damage, and I have here laid out for you the turns of sequence. He changes from turns 1 through 9, and then he has another pattern from 10 to 15, and then from 16 to 19, if you still haven't killed him by then, he'll just start killing your units one by one with a 99,999 single target attack. Next we have the Hellhound Boss, weak to water and resistant to fire, earth, and wind. He'll alternate attack patterns based on his normal form or when he's engulfed in flames. his normal pattern, he'll begin with a single target fire physical, single target double physical, single target physical with pain, fire magic AoE, plus an intellect debuff when he initiates his engulfed phase. Now with his engulfed phase, he'll start off with single target 2 fire physical fire AoE magic, leading into single target double physical fire, and a fire magic AoE that again intellect debuffs, and he switches back to his normal pattern. So essentially what you want to do here is that if you have a high enough DPS team, you shouldn't really even worry too much about this fight, especially if you're not running any magic users. But if your DPS isn't high enough, then for every 4th turn, you might want to put out your magic users so they don't get hit by that intellect debuff, as it is pretty significant of a debuff to reduce their output. Next we have the Elder Dragon boss, weak to water and resists fire. He starts off with a single target fire physical, AoE fire magic, then into AoE fire magic with a fire resistant debuff to your team, intellect debuff, and then an AoE fire with magic buff removal. At 75% health, he'll summon 2 adds, and his attack pattern changes into the following. AoE fire with a fire attribute debuff, meaning your team will get hit harder with fire attacks, multiple hit fire magic, AoE fire magic, single target fire magic, and then AoE fire magic with a party buff cancellation. Now once he summons the add, he'll continue to summon adds every 5 turns. They only have 2 attack patterns, which is a single target fire physical, and then they'll do an AoE fire magic. You want to burn him down as fast as you can while keeping in mind that he can dispel buffs such as your Mighty's Aqua Wall and Mario's other Aurora Force. But essentially, if you have enough water DPS, you should be able to kill this guy no problem. Finally, in Area 4, we have the Dark Salamander in Naru Volcano. He has about 5 million HP, very high HP at this point of the game, and he has very intense fire attacks, albeit maybe not as bad as the Elder Dragon, but it depends. Now, he is weak to water, no surprise there, and resistant to wind and earth, so don't use fire users, or else if you want to heal him. You can use Mighty and or Mario as countermeasures to his fire attacks, and Yuna can also be organized as well to help with debuffing the boss and have some recovery aid for the party. His attack patterns are as follows. When he's standing in arm phase, he does an AoE physical into AoE fire magic with a fire resist debuff into a single target earth, into an AoE fire magic, into a cumulative strength buff. Now when you deal enough damage to let him fall, you have a free turn, and then he does an AoE magic, AoE magic, AoE magic, and then gets up. At 25% HP, he'll stand up and summon 2 Hellhounds. Now the fallen pattern then changes into a cumulative intellect buff that goes into an AoE physical with seal, and then it goes into a single target double physical and he'll get up. During this phase, the Salamander get up will begin with a countdown timer. Now if you kill him before then, you don't have to worry about it, or if you knock him down again, he'll stop the countdown. Essentially, if he gets to 0, then you wipe, basically. And so he'll summon Hellhounds. Their pattern is as follows. They'll do an AoE fire magic that'll heal their allies into a multi-hit single target, into a single target physical, into a single target fire magic. My suggestion would be, if you want to kill the Hellhounds, that's perfectly fine, since they will cast recovery magic, essentially healing the boss. But if you have the opportunity to have pulled Shanie and you have 3 other really good water DPS, in a single AF bar you could vaporize his 5 mil the moment he lies down, but which means that you don't have to really rely on Mario or Mighty to mitigate the damage. But if you don't have that group comp, you can always go for the Hellhounds, nuke him as fast as possible, and then go for the boss again. Essentially, it's a pretty straightforward fight as long as you have the right team. Next, I want to discuss any noteworthy weapons from Ratle. We're going to be getting 4 new weapons: hammer, fist, bow, and spear. And on this first page, you're going to be able to see their stats here, including some of the required materials. And then I'm going to also add a little bit of my own notes here. I would say there's 2 weapons of noteworthiness. The Regent Spear is by far the one weapon you really want to go for. It increases your user's damage by 20%. That stacks additively with power buffs. And it's one of the main reasons why in the future, when they introduce the Another Style system, Suzette is going to be one of the biggest powerhouse users for this weapon. And so it also provides MP cost reduction, which is great. Who doesn't want that? That means you can spam more skills. And you can farm most of the materials here from the first and second areas for the Hornet Stingers and the Grass. And you want to kill the Hornet Boss from the first area 5 times for their sharp stingers. The next weapon of noteworthiness is the Regent Fist. And so it increases your non-elemental damage by up to 30% at +10. And so it allows basically users like Amy, when she gets her 5-star version later down the line, or even Lokito, which is one of the non-elemental fist users, to shine. And you can farm most of its materials in Area 1 for the Dino Claws and Hornet Stingers, and it shares the same material drops with the spears, so you'll be working on both at the same time as well, it seems. Finally, for the bow and the hammer, I would not suggest getting them. You can get them if you just want the raw stats, and if you have a team that is great to run Ratle, because they do have better stats than the other ADs currently available, but I wouldn't recommend upgrading them, especially since we're going to be also getting new weapons in the future as well. So those are just my suggestions for this update. Anyways, this video might have been a little bit longer than usual since I did go into quite a bit of details for this area. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you liked it, please consider subscribing, liking the video, and I'll try to pump out more content of Another Eden in the future. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.